Welcome everyone, I'm Edwin, and this week I'm going to give you a new perspective on abdominal strength training with relation to lower back pain, lumbar back pain, or things like anterior pelvic tilt. Now when we take a look in the modern fitness or well-being industry, the wellness and fitness industry, it seems that they will have us believe that strong abdominal muscles are the sole key in order to prevent oneself from lower back pain and in order to fix it if it's there already. Whether or not this is true as 100% statement is something that I'll be discussing in this video. Let me say out front, whenever you want to jump to a specific point in the video, please use the timecode list below in the description. Still, I urge you to watch the whole video in one big sweep in order to understand holistically what I'm really talking about and how all the dots of the pearl chain are connected with each other. Alright, now let's jump right into this interesting topic of using muscular strength training in order to balance a structural imbalance or a structural weakness, or maybe, that's the point, maybe a structural hypertension. Now in order to look at those things in a way that really makes sense holistically, physiologically, emotionally, structurally, anatomically, biomechanically, we need to understand something first, and that's what are the possible origins, what can be the root cause of a structural imbalance that shows itself as lower back pain or as anterior pelvic tilt or a collapsed spine, or furthermore as a serious injury in the lumbar spine like gliding vertebrae or intervertebral disc displacement or something like that. Now the point is, there is a great number of possible reasons why problems in the lumbar spine occur, or in the spine in general, or in the structure in general. If you watched a couple of my videos, you know by now that whenever I talk about structure, I sometimes like to pinpoint specific aspects, to point out specific aspects, but I always try to put them in relation with the whole system. And that's exactly what has to be done here. So a completely unilateral approach and say, you have lower back pain, you need to work on your abs, that's just not the entire truth. That might be true for some people, but it sure as hell is not true for everyone. Why? That's what we are going to discuss right now. At the beginning, let me point out a couple of possible origins or root causes for lumbar problems. And please understand, I try to make this video as short as possible, so obviously I can't possibly explain every possible cause. I can't possibly explain all the interconnections this has. I'm only trying to give you an idea, to widen your perspective in order not to get stuck in a very unilateral approach and in a very, very narrow-sighted point of view. That's the only thing I'm trying to give you. So let's jump into it. Possible causes for lumbar back pain. One would obviously be you're lifting a lot of heavy stuff all the time, maybe even doing it wrong, like going down like so. You put a lot of strain in the lumbar spine. Obviously, this could be one cause. Another problem would be bad posture sitting in front of a computer, bad posture doing whatever type of work it is that you do or that you have. Another problem might be too much strength and too much tightness due to too much strength training in your back area. Another problem can be tight shoulders. Another problem can be, or another origin for problems in the lumbar spine can be tight shoulders, can be tight jaw joints, can be a tight neck. Another version, another option is that the arches of your feet are completely collapsed. If the arches of your feet are collapsed, this structural imbalance right down at your foundation transmits itself throughout the legs into your pelvic ring, thus making it impossible for the spine to relax and to switch into its natural shape. Whenever you have a structural imbalance in your hip joints, your knee joints, or your feet, this directly translates to your spinal health over course of time. Now, another problem or another origin that might lead to lower back pain. I don't say that all of those things have to lead to lower back pain, but they can lead to it and or make it worse. If the reason is, say, that would be another reason, is an injury for something like that. That obviously can also be. Another problem in the lower back, or that causes things in the lower back, could be gynecological problems, digestive problems, bad breathing habits. If you always breathe very high up in your chest area, there is no movement whatsoever in your diaphragm, no movement whatsoever in your abdominal muscles, then this also can contribute or even create lumbar back problems. A tight psoas muscle, the psoas muscle is one of the hip flexor muscles. A tight psoas muscle can also lead to problems within the lumbar spine. And the psoas again is connected with systems all over the body. The psoas has to do with our breathing pattern, the psoas has to do with our ability for psychological balance, has to do with our expression of emotions, and so on. So the psoas is really one very important and central muscle that you always have to look at, especially if the question is there any type of problem in my lumbar spine? Another aspect would be very tight hamstrings can be one thing, and the quadriceps, a very tight quadriceps, can be another reason, because there is one part of the quadriceps that reaches over the hip joint, which can also lead to anterior pelvic tilt and doesn't have to do anything with the lumbar spine at first, but it can create problems later. Another major issue for lower back pain is stress. Emotional stress, mental stress, even physical stress. Physical stress might be due to a very loud work environment or due to certain vibrations in your work environment. And I mean physical vibrations, like a train passing by all the time and really vibing the whole building, or maybe you working a jackhammer all the time, or stuff like that. So that's a combination. It puts a lot of strain and stress on the physical body, but also on the emotions, also on your mental abilities. All those things can be root causes for lower back pain. And a couple of more. And now you answer that question, please. Do you think that strengthening your abdominal muscles is the sole solution, or the solution for all these possible causes? It can't be. There is no biomechanical, physiological, or anatomical way that training your abdominal muscles could possibly balance all those aspects that I just mentioned. It's not possible. The only thing you can do using your abdominal muscles is you can stabilize the spine. That's what Kisa training or most physical therapists and stuff like that, they always put that out front. You have to stabilize your structure using your muscles. It can't be further from the truth. Because what they teach, what most of them teach in terms of stabilizing the structure, literally means to stiffen the structure. And a stiff structure is a dead structure. The more stiff you get, the less mobility you have. The closer you are to degenerating even more, to creating more problems in a shorter period of time. The body is designed to move, and it's absolutely important that the ability to move the body is at the top of the list of what has to be done in order to balance a structural imbalance. There are some exceptions to this last sentence I just said. One of those exceptions would be an acute intervertebral disc displacement. Another exception would be a gliding vertebra. A vertebra that sits so loosely within the structure of the spine. The structure of the spine is held by a lot of connective tissue, a lot of fascia. It's held by muscles, but it's also held by ligaments and tendons from the muscles. The gliding vertebra sits so loosely that the spine loses coherence at that point, and this potentially can damage also all the nerves that run within your spinal column. So those would be two exceptions. Or, for example, if you have, say, a broken vertebra, until it's healed, obviously it's not a good idea to work on mobility. So those are some, and I almost would say those are almost 100% of the exceptions. There are some specific injuries and some specific diseases within the spine that would add exceptions, but that's only for professionals standpoint. Yeah? So for a normal day person, the things that most people have to do with, those would be the exceptions. Why? Because a gliding vertebra, obviously, you don't work on even more mobility. Then you try to stabilize the spine. Yes. If you have a massive disc displacement, then you try to stabilize the spine first before you think of how to move or how to coordinate the body again. Yes, okay, I'm completely in line with that. But if you do not have any of those two issues, then mobility is more important than stability, because out of proper mobility comes the proper stability. And now, with the term stability, a mobile stability means that the body is able to move. It's not stiff. As soon as stability is understood as something, I have to hold my body in this position permanently because that's stable, that's the correct upright posture. That's unnatural. And that will lead to you losing more and more abilities of your body, more and more adaptability, more and more literally life out of your body. You have to use your structure, you have to use your joints in order to keep them healthy and in order to get them healthy again. And that's the most important aspect. If someone has collapsed arches of the foot, there is no spinal training, no abdominal training, no relaxation technique, no fascia technique that you can possibly use in your spine that will sustainably heal the problems in the spine unless you tackle the problem with the collapsed arch of the foot first. So before even starting to think about using your abdominal muscles to counteract an anterior pelvic tilt when the arches of your foot are completely collapsed, before you even think about that, you need to restructure the arches of the foot. Once that happened, then a couple of weeks later, then you can take a look at this structure. And then you can say, is it necessary? Is it really necessary to use the abdominal muscles to stabilize? Is it really necessary to train a specific muscle group apart from restructuring the arches of the foot in the spine in order to get it back into original shape or not? Before that, it's not possible to make any proper assumption or assessment about that. Obviously, another aspect would be high heels. Now, high heels push the body in a position where it's almost impossible to let the sacrum naturally drop down. A healthy spine is a rather long spine. And I know in many anatomical books that are out on the market at the moment, the spine is shown in very strong curves. That actually has to do with the process of how this anatomical information is gathered and does not necessarily have to do with what is really the most physiological function and position of the spine. Because if you examine all the angles between the joints, between the vertebrae, if you examine the thickness of the intervertebral discs and you add those aspects to each other, and you add the pulling aspects of all the fascia, of all the muscles, of all the connective tissue, the ligaments, then you'll find that the spine does have its curve. But that this curve in a physiologically healthy person is a lot less than shown in an anatomy book. But most people nowadays, they are trained after those anatomy books. Now the point is, you would say, well, but those people should know, those people doing anatomy, they should know. Yes, they should, but the point is that the anatomical norm is reset every couple of years. So roughly every 10 years, depending on the structure, but roughly every 10 years, you reassess the structure of what you could call a normal, healthy human being, someone who currently doesn't have a lot of health issues. And you take a couple of people, just giving you a number by thumb right now, say you take 100 people or 1,000 people, and you assess their structure. And from what you see from those x-rays, what you see from that structure, that's what they call, okay, that's our new norm. Not taking into account that the structure of people 10, 20, 40, 50 years later also changed due to the change of living conditions. 40 years ago, people didn't sit that much in front of a computer. Even if someone doesn't have lower back pain at the moment, the strain on the spine right now is completely a different one than 30, 40, 50 years ago. Back then they did a lot of heavy physical work. But actually that heavy physical work kept a lot of people structurally healthier than sitting in front of a computer and doing nothing. And those are aspects that are not taken into account. Now there is a very old anatomical book was written, if I remember correctly, I think in the 1940s. And back in that day, that book, they have a line in there, and that line says that, under quotation marks, the natural curves of the spine, they only develop throughout the lifespan of a human, depending on the external forces he is connected with, or he or she has to do with. In a young person, in a young healthy person who moves constantly, you normally should not find such strong curvatures of the spine. It was a short excursus, still I think a very important one. Now, talking about this abdominal training, using abdominal muscle training in order to balance a very strong hollow back or anterior pelvic tilt, using abdominal training in order to balance out such a posture always should require an assessment of what is the root cause of this specific structure first, of this specific structural imbalance. The root cause has to be diagnosed before. Another aspect I didn't mention before, just to give you an example. Psychologically, there is also a lot of people out there who have an anterior pelvic tilt. Now, what does that have to do with psychology? Especially women, and in this group again, especially women who have been abused in one way or the other. Very strong emotional abuse or even sexual harassment. They tend to literally pull back their genitalia, to pull them further in between the legs. This pulling back of the genitalia in an attempt to protect them from a direct interaction with one's opponent or with someone who is standing next to me and who you might not be completely comfortable with. This has nothing to do with a structural imbalance in the first place. It's a psychological imbalance, a psychological trauma that leads to a specific protecting structure. If you try to balance something like that using abdominal training, you create immense internal stress in this person. Because one part, the training of the abdominal muscles say, bring the pelvis in a neutral position. But the psychological, internal mechanics of this person say, no way, no. We have to protect our genitalia. So you create impossibly to imagine high internal tension between psychological aspects and physical aspects, which creates enormous amounts of internal stress and makes even more problems for the whole structure, because this leads to even more tension in the physical body. So in order to balance something like that, before you go and work on your abdominal muscles, you have to heal the emotional trauma first. Maybe even the physical trauma if that was a real rape situation or something like that. And that's not the main group for something like that are women, but it's not limited to women. There are men who are doing the same thing as well. So with this example, I only want to show you how deeply interconnected different aspects of our lives are with the structure. And to simply say, oh yeah, anterior pelvic tilt, ah yeah, very strong hollow back problems due to that, meaning, yeah, someone has this very strong hollow back, and you immediately say, well, that's because of weak abdominal muscles. This is much too easy. Many people make it themselves much too easy with that. I give all those systems credit for one thing. If you stabilize your spine using abdominal muscles in order to counteract maybe hypertension in the lower back, or maybe a so-called collapsed structure of the lower back and a wrong structure of the pelvic ring, if you use your abdominal muscles to stabilize this area, it will decrease the pain momentarily. But it will not do so sustainably over the course of years, and even worse, it will damage the spine further. A lot of pressure in the intervertebral discs, which is exactly what happens if you train your abdominal muscles and do not check for the root cause of a structural imbalance first. If hypertension in the lower back is the cause and you use your abdominal muscles to rebalance that, instead of working on releasing the lumbar muscles first, you create a lot of pressure in the intervertebral discs and their connections to the vertebrae, thus damaging them even further. Although, at the beginning, it will feel nice. At the beginning, you feel less pain. But whenever we're talking about such things, I'll definitely urge you, do not seek for the shortest solution. Literally, go to a specialist. Go to someone who is trained not only physically, but also emotionally, structurally, biomechanically, physiologically. Someone who has a lot more training than your regular fitness instructor. And I know there are some fitness instructors out there who know about such things and who are capable of doing that. But most of them are not. And even so-called specialists, I mentioned KISA training before because it's a thing in Europe at the moment, and I guess around the world, slowly but steady. Even so-called specialists who put you in those machines in the KISA training, they have no training whatsoever in analyzing anything other than where does the structure look collapsed or too open. Because their only tool is to strengthen muscles. You can't fix tightness in the structure by adding tightness at some other point in the structure. You have to release this initial tightness first, and then you can work on coordinating the muscles until a balance in the tension and relaxational ability of those two muscles is restored. If the problem is a structural one, structural meaning a foot that a tight joint or a collapsed arch of the foot or tightness in the neck area or in the shoulder area. If the problem for lumbar spine pain comes from your neck area, using abdominal muscles won't solve the problem. If you reverse it, it might. Meaning, if you have lumbar troubles that lead to pain in the neck, then fixing your lumbar troubles, maybe even by coordinating and training the abdominal muscles, that might then fix the pain in the neck. But that's the thing. You always have to start fixing something at its origin. Everything else is just doing either the wrong thing or something that even creates more problems. And it's just a workaround. It's just fighting a symptom that won't lead to anything. It's like you realize the light don't work. Okay. You just screw out the light bulb and put in a new one. And you think, there is still no light. And instead of going to the fuse box to see whether or not the problem lies there, you go and change every single light bulb in the whole flat or in the whole house in order to fix a problem. That's because of this tight, narrow point of view. That, oh, light doesn't work. Well, light comes from a light bulb. Well, there must be the problem. And that's just an analogy for this quick fix aspect that nowadays we see a lot in modern wellness and fitness industry. And as I mentioned, even some physiotherapists, if they are only trained in structural aspects, then they are sometimes too narrow-minded. But there are specialists out there. There are people out there who are trained in all those different areas, who are trained in the biomechanical aspects, who are also trained in this type of view that is necessary in order to realize and to analyze, well, if this person moves, I see a structural imbalance here, but is what I see initially also the root cause? Yeah, no, it can be, but in a lot of cases it is not. And that's exactly, this open-mindedness is one of the most important aspects that someone who helps you structurally has to have. And then they need a lot of knowledge on the body and on psychological, physiological interactions and connections. And then you can take a closer look. Maybe the problem isn't even in the body at the beginning. Maybe the problem is, say, a mattress in your bed that just simply hurts you. And yes, there is something like that. I'm doing a video about mattresses and proper sleeping stuff somewhere within the next couple of weeks, months. That's on the list. Anyway. Yeah, but also your surroundings obviously can have a major effect. What type of chair you use. A lot of so-called modern ergonomic chairs, they actually do more damage than they do good. But you have to know what specifically it is that you need. Same goes for shoes, and so on. But there we're gliding into the aspects of other videos and of a lot bigger pictures. I will be talking about our body structure and how all those interactions work in the very near future. Especially because many people still think of the body as being built by building blocks, like literally like bricks of a house. One brick, the other brick sits on top of it, the other brick sits on top of it, the other brick sits on top of it, and then comes the roof. But that's not how the body is built. The body is actually, you can understand the body much more as different bricks that are mobile towards each other. And I'm going to talk about this later more. Just to give you an idea, this structure here is called a tensegrity structure. A tensegrity structure is a structure that's comprised of continual tensional and discontinual compressional aspects. And that's how the human body is built. So all our bones, even in the joints, they do not necessarily transmit tension and pressure from one bone directly to the other. They do so in parts, but a lot of internal pressure, a lot of our weight, is actually also distributed through these tensional aspects that come to be due to the muscles and the fascia system, their connective tissue layers, and the ligaments and tendons, and even the capsules of the joints. But I'm going to talk about that in another video a little more. Alright. I hope you enjoyed it. I guess you got a completely new perspective on training your abdominal muscles in order to fix the posture. If you want to train your abdominal muscles, do so. But always remember that coordinating the muscles is more important than stiffening the body. Whenever you have tension on two sides of a joint at the same time, hypertension, even worse, this creates problems. Normally, the muscles on two sides of a joint should work together. They should balance. None of them should be completely relaxed. But here's the good news. I'd estimate, and that estimation doesn't only come from me. I say I'd estimate because I work for more than 17 years with people right now, and I've never seen anyone having too weak abdominal muscles in order to have a perfect structure. And I know that there can be situations where this actually is the cause of it. I know this sort of imbalance of a structure being completely too weak is also something that exists, but that's marginal. Most problems do not come from a muscle that is too weak. In most people, the problems come from muscles that are too tense or from structural imbalances in other parts of the body than the spinal region. With the one exception I gave you before, with that one exception of gliding vertebrae or intervertebral disc displacement, where it's actually a good idea to stabilize that specific area, but also that specific area, not the whole body. So altogether, make sure to coordinate your muscles properly. Make sure to learn about mobility and make sure to learn how to move properly, because movement is the one thing that keeps you alive and healthy in all aspects of your being, in your psychological and your physiological anatomical aspects. No matter if we're talking about digestion, if we're talking about blood circulation, if we're talking about neurotransmitters, if we're talking about psychological, emotional, mental, energetical aspects, anatomical aspects. It's true for all those things. Movement is key. To go to a place where you don't move or you limit your movement is never a good idea, unless you have serious structural problems due to injury before. And that's something else, that's different, but most people don't have that. Alright, that's it for today. I wish you a wonderful time. Thanks a lot for watching. If you liked the video, please make sure to subscribe, to like and to share it. I like this information to get out. And yeah, also if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment box. I'll answer them as far as possible. And yeah, I like this discussion to be going. Have a wonderful time. All the best to you and enjoy.